Welcome to this ATA Insights webinar. Thank you for your ongoing interest and support of our webinar program. Today's session will begin in 2 minutes. ATA Insights Webinars is an online platform for the dissemination of professional renewable energy knowledge across international borders. Our aim is to democratize access to information, for innovation to spread faster, and to make the industry more competitive. And we do this through our online sessions, open to all our members. Every year we do more than 100 sessions with over 250 speakers, 50,000 attendees from more than 50 countries. To participate in the session today, use the chat on the right-hand side to introduce yourself, your company, and where you're joining from. Under the screen, you will find the Q&A box, where you can send your questions for the speakers. We will get to as many as we can today. We're recording this session, and we will send you a link to the materials in a few days. Please consider supporting our content creation for the webinar program. Contact us on the email on screen. Welcome to this.
All right, well, thank you everyone for joining. Welcome to this session, Unveiling the Future of Long-Duration Energy Storage Solutions in the UK. My name is Christina Galan, and I will be the moderator of this webinar today from ATA Insights. So we have a very interesting panel and with amazing speakers today. So we have tons of presentations to talk a lot about what is happening in the LDES world today, especially in the UK market. So we will start soon. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. First of all, this session is being recorded and we will share it to everyone in a couple of days alongside the presentations of our panelists. As the video said, you have a Q&A box right below for any questions that you want to ask to our speakers. We will try to get to them as fast as we can, but we do have a lot of information to provide. So if we do not answer all the questions, these questions are always sent to the panelists, so they also can answer by email after the webinar. You also have a chat for those who are on Zoom. Let us know who you are, where you're coming from, why you're interested in LDS in the UK. And for those who are on YouTube, you also have a chat where you can also ask your questions and also let us know a little bit about yourself. So since we have a really, we have a lot of presentations, I think that's it from me. So I'm going to give the floor to our first panelist, who is Alex Campbell, Director of Policy and Partnerships at the LDES Council. So Alex, whenever you're ready, I'm going to stop sharing so you can start sharing your presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christine. I'm assuming you can see the slides.
We can see them perfectly.
Great, thank you. So as you heard, my name is Alex Campbell. I'm Director of Policy and Partnerships at the Long Duration Energy Storage Council, or LDES Council for short. And for the sake of time, we'll just say LDES Council and LDES. So who are we? We were formed in 2021 at COP26 in Glasgow. We really represent the full ecosystem of LDES, if you like. So as well as the technology providers, also some of the biggest users and investors in energy globally. And quick word on definitions. We define LDES as the ability to discharge energy continuously for 8 or more hours. And that can be over days, weeks, months, even seasonally. And we're part of a wider network, the Global Renewables Alliance, which some of you might be familiar with, which was one of the driving forces at the last COP, pushing for a trebling of renewables by 2030, amongst other things. So wide range of partners that we work with really to make the case for long-duration energy storage globally. So why do we need long-duration energy storage, or LDES? So hopefully this won't come as a huge surprise to you, but the global energy system is changing. We need to decarbonize power, obviously. So that means a shift away from coal and gas. The heavy lifting there is going to be done by wind and solar PV. And as well, of course, as decarbonising power, we need to electrify wide parts of the other wider energy system, most obviously with things like electric vehicles or domestic heating or what have you. That clearly creates challenges. The sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. So we know that we need to have greater flexibility in our power systems as we get rid of those flexible sources of gas and coal. What does that mean in terms of duration of storage and so on? So lithium ion doing a fantastic job over shorter durations today and will continue to do so in the future. Just a quick note here to say, though, as you get beyond about 60 to 70% of your power coming from variable renewables, the need for in-depth, long duration storage rapidly increases. And that's where LDES really comes into play. What does that mean in terms of numbers? Well, we did some analysis a couple of years ago with McKinsey, which found that up to 8 terawatts of LDES could be needed globally on the lowest cost pathway to net zero. About 3 terawatts of that is on power and about 5 terawatts on thermal. And I'll talk a little bit about the different technologies in a moment. And that could lead to up to $540 billion US dollars annually in terms of system savings globally. Huge economic potential there, and of course big carbon savings as well. So what is LDES? What are our different families, as we call them? So we have mechanical types of storage, so pump storage, hydropower, compressed air, very well established technologies around for many years. We also have thermal storage, so this takes renewably generated electricity, stores it in the form of heat, which can then be dispatched back into the electricity grid via electricity, turned back into electricity, or used as firm low carbon heat, which is incredibly important for decarbonising industry, for example. Huge amount of global emissions come from industrial heat. We also have chemical storage, so most obviously green hydrogen, and then of course electrochemical. So that's different types of batteries, as well as lithium ion. There's a wide range of other battery types. So lots of different technologies fulfilling slightly different roles, but all absolutely essential in the energy transition. So if all these technologies are fantastic and needed, why aren't they being deployed at scale? So with some of the newer technologies, of course, that first of a kind hurdles need to be got over. There's certain risks involved with deploying, of course, new technologies, but the real challenge that we see globally is that electricity markets are not really structured in a way that incentivizes the deployment of LDES. So we've seen with, offshore wind or transmission infrastructure or nuclear, you need to be able to provide investors with a long-term visibility of their revenues. We don't really have that for LDES globally. There are some efforts being made to address that, and I'll come on to those in a moment. But it's really the number one ask that we have with regulators and policymakers. We have, of course, a range of policy options that we think that are there that can help with this. So on the right-hand side, the kind of direct technology support mechanisms, this might be grants and incentives. It might be de-risking mechanisms, government-backed loan guarantees, for example. On the left-hand side, you can see those long-term market signals. So these can be things like carbon pricing, getting rid of fossil fuel subsidies. Targets for renewables will increase the need for LDES. And then, of course, storage capacity targets. And then crucially, in the middle there, as I talked about, revenue mechanisms, things which provide that visibility. We've got the cap and floor being discussed in the UK, of course. We have things like clean PPAs, which can be industry leading without really needing governments to necessarily be involved, and all sorts of other types of mechanisms that are at play. So just a quick roundup of what we're seeing going on around the world. This is not all inclusive. There are many things happening in different markets. But so, for example, in the EU, the electricity market design that will be coming into force later on this year will require member states to undertake a flexibility assessment and establish some indicative targets for non-fossil fuel flexibility. So we think that will be a major boost to LDES in the EU. Some EU states are already moving ahead. Italy is directly procuring LDES assets. Ireland had a consultation last year on how it's going to get up to 2.2, nearly 3 gigawatts of LDES. In the US, major tax credit benefits are going to various storage technologies, including LDES. Australia has various things going on at the federal and the state level. And then places like China, of course, really ambitious targets for some types of LDES, such as pump storage, hydropower. So lots and lots going on around the world. Investment coming in from governments in terms of innovation funding and so on, and for direct procurement. And then just to finish up from me, what we're also seeing is real activity at the multilateral level. So the likes of the International Energy Agency, IEA, called in February in its ministerial statement for a global target on storage. The G7, their most recent ministerial communique, or leaders communique, sorry, again calling for a big target, in this case 1.5 terawatts by 2030 of storage, of power storage. So lots and lots happening globally. We'll be pushing at COP later on this year, again, to really try and get a storage target embedded in the ongoing energy transition narrative. So thank you very much for your time. Rattled through a lot of stuff there. There's my contact details if you need them. Reports are on our website, and we've got more coming out later on this year, including cost benchmarking and an updated project tracker. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Alex. I'm very impressed with everything you talked about in just a short little amount of time. So congratulations, because that was a very clear view of what's happening in the LDES landscape, not only in the UK, but worldwide. So moving forward, we're going to pass the floor to Stephen Crosher from RheEnergise, who's going to talk a little bit about how our RheEnergise is working in the UK market. So Stephen, I believe you also have some slides you would like to share. Perfect. Now, all right, you all ready? Whenever you're ready, Stephen. You're on mute, just so you know.
No, I'm not.
No, you're not.
Once and clearly hadn't pressed it hard enough. So hello, everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you, Alex, for the introduction. You've saved me so much time in my presentation. So I'm the CEO of RheEnergise. My name's Stephen Crosher, and our aim at RheEnergise is to solve the energy transition with a low-cost, scalable energy storage solution. And the trend, and that's not working. Okay, so we all know that the world needs to decarbonize to avoid the damaging effects of climate change. And we also know that there's a solution in the forms of renewable energy, but that's intermittent, as Alex has already said. So moving swiftly on. And also, as Alex has said, as the amount of renewables increases, you need to dramatically increase the amount of energy storage. And when we're talking about energy storage, we're talking really about different types of energy storage. So there's the shorter duration types of energy storage dominated by the highly effective lithium-ion batteries at the moment. And then at the other end of the scale, there will be need for interseasonal type storage, where high-density hydro, our solution for medium-duration energy storage, sits is in the middle. So it's really to solve the challenge of the daily cycling of solar or the twice-weekly cycling of wind as an approximation. So our solution, we call it high-density hydro. So it's based on traditional pumped hydropower. So for anyone who doesn't know, that's where you have a reservoir behind a dam at the top of a mountain in a big valley, and you have another reservoir at the bottom of the mountain. And when energy is abundant, you pump it up. And when energy is less abundant or scarce, you release the same water down through a pipe and regenerate the electricity via a turbine. Round-trip efficiencies for traditional pump storage can be a little bit over 80%, figures 75 to a little bit over 80% is what you typically see. So with high-density hydro, we're doing the same thing as traditional pumped hydro, but rather than using water, we've introduced a fluid that is 2.5 times denser than water. So what that does is really gives us two principal advantages. We can lower the vertical elevation proportional to increase in density. So we get the same performance at only 40% of the vertical elevation. So rather than looking for mountains for our solution, we're looking for hills. And as we all know, when we look out to the train window, there are many more hills than mountains. And so what we're bringing is scalability to traditional pumped hydro. And traditional pumped hydro has been around for 100 years or thereabouts, so it's really mature, globally deployed, has a global footprint, and still represents by far the majority of the energy stored globally. when we look at other technologies in this space, and there's been a number of sort of reports and work done on this, what we find is that when you're looking at different types of energy storage technologies, that if you can do traditional pumped hydro, it is always, and by a significant margin, the lowest cost form of energy storage available. And our analysis indicates that our high-density hydro energy storage will maintain those low levelized costs of energy storage. And what you also find is that the case for, we're often asked about how we compare with other solutions, particularly lithium-ion batteries. And the analysis that others have done and we have done is that they're a fantastic solution for up to a certain amount of duration. But beyond that, it's maybe 4 hours, it's maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. It depends a lot on the market. But beyond that, you're really looking for other forms of long duration energy storage and a type of energy storage that can really scale globally in a very short time period. So another look at this, where we sit compared to other technologies. So we're around about traditional pumped hydro. This case is for an 8 to 10 hour duration case. So that's the daily cycling of wind, the twice weekly cycling of solar. And for that use case, we're a significantly lower cost solution than almost any of the competing technologies. And then where do we sit in the market? This is in the UK, but it's also in many other or any market that you're looking at. And when you're looking at the amount of power you need in terms of energy storage, you find that gives you one answer. But when you're really talking about energy storage, you're looking at the amount of energy you stored and therefore the amount of energy that is traded. And what we find is where we look to sit, which is in the 4 to 16 hour part of the market, a grid connected solution in the 10 to 100 megawatts of power range, that this is the volume part of the market, is maybe up to 60 to 70% of the total energy volumes that is traded in a market. And so this is where the value lies in a future scenario with lots of renewable energy. And then where do we sit in this? Alex, just before me, talked about McKinsey's work of a $4 trillion market. $1 trillion of that is renewables. Is heat. 3 trillion is the electricity part of this, which is where we sit. And then going back to the previous slide, where it's around 2/3 of that market, the volume market where we sit, is the serviceable, addressable market for us. And then we actually think we have a highly credible solution, one of the few out there that is both incredibly low cost and scalable globally in the timescale that the climate crisis demands. And therefore, we have an obtainable market that is actually incredibly significant. And we're incredibly excited about the future and the possibilities that RheEnergise offer. Both from a business perspective, but more importantly, from the opportunity of enabling the deployment of renewables at scale so that we can decarbonize the energy systems and save gigatons of CO2. How am I doing for time? I want to know that I'm not going to run out of time.
No, you're still good. You're still good.
Okay, still good. Okay, so this is some of the projects we're looking at in our pipeline. So this is a cluster of 100 megawatt projects in the Atacama. It's 400 megawatts at 10 hours duration. And what we're finding is in locations like Chile, in particular, Australia, southern United States, the Middle East, is they're looking for volume solutions that can also live in the water scarce climates that they're experiencing. So Chile has had 15 to 40 years of drought, depending on which part of the country you're in. And so water is a significant problem. And so we're a true closed loop system, and so we can manage evaporation. And we also don't really care about high ambient temperatures. We don't mind if our fluid gets to 67 degrees centigrade, which is unusual for an energy storage solution that can cope with that sort of level of high ambient temperatures. And then this is the project that we're building at the moment. So we're in construction at the moment. It's down in the southwest of the UK. We're partnering with Sibelco, who own this mine site. and it's a 500 kilowatt demonstration project. So we're about 5 weeks into that build program. Basically, it's a big hole in the ground at the moment, and the aim for that is over this summer to do the civil engineering and the construction work, and then following on with that is the mechanical electrical installations, and then into commissioning and operation. So that's a bit of work, and we're very grateful to have won the long duration energy storage competition from the UK's government. So this is the bespoke high density turbine that we've had made. It's on the boat or on the lorry coming over to the UK from Turkey at the moment. So high density hydro, the architecture of the solution we use is like traditional pumped hydro, but because of the high density fluid, you have to re-engineer everything. So it's the same basic architecture, but the detail of it is actually quite different. And a few more images of our R&D facility and the turbine being made. And then this is our team. We have a fantastic team, and so I'm pleased to take any questions in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. You already have a couple of questions coming up. Feel free to answer them, or we can, if we have time, answer them after the presentations. But thank you so much for your
Do you want me to answer the questions now?
later. Let's first go to all well, you can answer them. You can write them if you want, or answer them a bit later. But right now, let's move forward to the other presentations that we have. So whatever works best for you, Stephen. So we're going to move to Philip Leigh from the University of Cumbria. Hi, Philip. Good morning. Philip will be talking a little bit more about other technologies in the LDES arena. So Philip, whenever you're ready, you can share your presentation.
Can you confirm that sharing?
You're sharing the whole screen. So there should be an option where you share the slides only.
Is that working?
Perfect. Now, there you go. You're all set.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to this. And my name is Phil Leigh, and I work at the University of Cumbria. And I'm going to talk a little bit about energy vectors, power to X, and energy storage through chemical synthesis of ammonia. So briefly, I'm going to look at UK's energy chemical estuary, energy storage, power to X, ammonia energy vector, and some innovation part. So I've worked across the Humber and Teesside as areas, and a lot happens on the east coast of England as energy and chemical estuaries. So this is a good place to look at some of this kind of work. And if we look at some of the offshore wind generation, we can see that a lot's happening around the UK coast, but especially off the east coast of the UK. And we're looking at 30 plus gigawatts of offshore wind generation potentially by 2030. And a company I also work with is a green energy storage company called Story Electric, and they're looking at large scale, long duration energy electricity storage. And while many nations do have this potential to be energy independent, one thing that's often missing is storing renewable energy at gigawatt and terawatt scale that can be dispatchable at any time across any season. So Story Electric's Abiatic Green case compressed air energy storage is an efficient, cost-effective energy storage solution, and so this is something that they're looking at. It's developer project technologies which look at the biggest issue with green energy, and this schematic just shows some of that. So if we look at the left, we've got energy generation, but via potentially offshore wind. It could be solar, it could be hydro, as Steve just mentioned in the previous presentation. And that power in comes through a compressor that's compressed down, and it can be 600 meters plus down these salt caverns. and they're compressed in there. It's held at around 70 bar pressure, and then there's a heat management system overarching on the surface. And when there's a demand for power, the compressed air can be released through pipework into an expander, and then ultimately through a generator to power out and put into the grid. And this can also be used in rebalancing and times of intermittent energy. So also the previous and Alex and Stephen have been talking about energy storage and large scale, and this plot shows a bit where different technologies can sit in whether it's for seconds, minutes, hours, days, or weeks storage, and depending on the size of kilowatt to megawatts, right up to gigawatt scale. And what we're looking at here is the kind of dark blue oval at the top, chemical methane, hydrogen, ammonia area, which is that long duration, large scale energy storage. And here, if we look at this, this is just shows how much the landscape's changing over time. And in the past, we'd only had about 10% renewable share into the energy mix. Today, we're looking at 20 plus, and that's growing. We've got to look at, if we can look at real market integration, and both Alex and Stephen touched on that, then that can increase to 40 plus. But as we go on, we've got to think about where do we really want to get to. And if we go to the right-hand side, we look at 80% plus, when we've got a decoupled generation with storage systems, and these have got to be large-scale storage systems. We have the potential to achieve that level of renewables into our energy mix and ecosystems. Power to X is basically a method for utilizing surplus electrical power that can be, it's often generated during periods when fluctuating renewable energy generation can exceed the load, such as at night. And so what do we do with that? And often things have to be switched off, and it's a real challenge, and it can be cheap power. People start using it overnight to run the washing machines and things like that. But can we use that for storing and putting energy into, for example, salt caverns? So here we've got things like photovoltaics, wind power, hydropower, and through such generation through a conversion mechanism via water electrolysis. We can then look at different applications of hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, and these can be all sorts of energy feedstocks. So there's a huge opportunity to utilize this going forward. And basically, with renewable energy, the ammonia cycle is effectively carbon free. So we look at nitrogen from the air, water plus energy, and we end up with green ammonia. And effectively, that can be so this opportunity in the technology for ammonia synthesis and this kind of power conversion, we end up with electrochemically produced ammonia, and then that's a storage opportunity. And while some of the opportunity here is that there's a lot of energy goes into the chemical industry, so the opportunity is through this kind of carbon-free synthesis of chemicals that is effectively powered by renewables. So a lot of ammonia that currently is produced by natural gas and other mediums, but we have the opportunity to look at things like offshore wind, hydro, and other renewable technologies for this. And it's also a very good energy vector, is ammonia, and it's got power density similar to fossil fuels. And we see on this plot, and it's got a similar pattern. So we've got diesel, gasoline, but you can see all the carbon embedded in those. But when we come down to NH3 ammonia, there's none there. It's zero. So it's really useful for a lot of applications. And again, looking here, generation, synthesis, and use. This schematic illustrates this again in a little bit more detail of where it can be used. And I think this is something that we need to think about when we're looking at long duration, large scale energy storage. And key systems inside this are the wind turbine, which we need for the renewable energy, nitrogen generator, water electrolysis, ammonia reactor, and internal combustion engine. And from that, we can look to generate this energy storage, ammonia energy storage system. And obviously, this is a small scale one. This is basically just showing how energy storage in the future is going to be indispensable into future energy ecosystems. And this is just illustrating, and I'm not going into detail, it's quite complex, but how this can be how large scale energy storage will apply to the future energy systems. And talking of that kind of whole systems approach, and this is something that entities are looking at, like off the east coast of England, for example. And that energy systems integration is really important in energy storage. And I'm just going to leave you with this slide, and it just shows the innovation landscape. I think I'm nearly running out of time, so I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Philip, for your presentation. Right, well, moving on, we have Ed Porter from Modo Energy. Good morning, Ed. Ed will be talking about a really big part of LDES, which are batteries, right? And how they are evolving in the LDES landscape. So I already see your presentation ready. Ed, can you, I think you are already on mute, so whenever
Great.
you're ready.
You can all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Well, thanks, Christina, and good morning, all. So, yeah, just to talk very quickly about sort of Modo Energy, we work with battery operators and developers around GB. We work with over 95% of the current GB fleets, as well as in ERCOT and CAISO as well. And so we really are based in what is happening right now in terms of delivered and operational projects. And so why I'm here to chat to you today is both as someone who loves long duration storage and sees a massive need for it, but also someone who brings the reality of like what I see in the market. And so I really want to make sure that that lands with everyone. And obviously very happy to take questions and all the rest of it. So there have been some excellent presentations before, which have done a very good job of describing the journey to net zero that we need to go on. This is just a chart of the various sectors that need to be picked up. Obviously, that the power sector is that small little purple one. It's a very easy thing. It's only a small little bar. Just get it fixed by 2035, no problem. So that's what we need to do. And this is a little bit of what has to change. So from the current system that's around 300 terawatt hours per year, we need to get to around about 900 terawatt hours a year of generation output in order to make sure we can actually meet the additional demand, but also decarbonize that electricity sector. So a huge amount of work to go on within the power sector here. And then kind of basing this into reality of kind of what's happening right now. So battery projects that have taken final investment decision and are running at the moment, that fleet now stands at 4 gigs and 5.2 gigawatt hours. By the time we get to 2027, we have that number as 15 gigawatts, and I think it's between 1.5 to 2 hours in terms of duration. So just as a number, that is what is commercially viable and what is operating today in the GB market. So just have that in your head. And then this is the kind of deployment rate that we're seeing. So at the moment, the market is able to deliver around about 400 megawatts per quarter. Q1 delivered slightly less than that. We expect by the end of 2024 will be something around about 6 gigs in terms of battery storage projects that are delivered. So that's the scale. And in terms of what these batteries are starting to look like, anyone in the battery space who's been in the battery space for a while will remember things like UKPN doing a 2.5 megawatt battery back in 2012. Well, it's kind of changed, and the batteries that we see in the market today, these are the rough sizes that you see. So sites like Trafford at 1 gigawatt, there are other sites that are 300, 400 megawatts. Those are becoming the norm with regards to short and medium duration energy storage projects. Where does that leave us? When we run our techno-economic model out until 2050 and look at the costs of battery storage, this is the kind of mix that we see. So in order to balance the system, keep the amount of lost load, so keep the outages down to a minimum, this is how much storage we expect to see on the GB grid, and different colors represent different durations. And so you can see 1 hour durations are kind of They do in all markets. They get us started and they deal with frequency response type issues. But as you go beyond that time, you start having proper energy imbalance problems, and you start having difficulties in terms of managing kind of intraday type problems, and so your durations grow. And I think that number probably is wrong, which is nice to say. So kind of shouldn't really probably say that, but I think the number probably is wrong. And the reason why I think it's wrong is this. So we ran that number that is our Q1 number. So it's not out of date by very much. But what we've seen in terms of battery costs on the right-hand side of this chart, so wind and solar is useful, but this is from the Rocky Mountain Institute, who put out some really good slides on these kinds of costs, but effectively battery costs on the right-hand side. Here you can see what's changed in battery costs. And the thing that I would like to highlight here is that even since Q1, battery costs for lithium cells have come down to more or less like $60 per kilowatt hour. And I'm not saying that to say that they will replace long duration storage. As I said at the start, I really want to make it clear that really excited about long duration storage, but the scale of the challenge and what they need to beat is really, really competitive. And hopefully this kind of is starting to highlight that. And as those lithium costs get cheaper and the performance gets better, things like this will start to happen. So what you can see on screen is nothing to do with a battery, really. I think that's a 400 kV substation for anyone kind of familiar with big networks. And then on the right-hand side, you can see some solar sites. But that little red kind of quadrant, that is what a company called Statera Energy has decided to put on a 290 megawatt battery storage scheme with a duration of up to 6 hours. So the thing that's really interesting about that is that as these lithium cells become cheaper, things like 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours become much more feasible for those techs. And again, it's not to say we won't see those, but it's not to say they will replace long duration storage. It's just to say that is kind of what people are building in today's market. So a very quick piece around what batteries actually do today. So this is a really nice description. Here you can see the red line is frequency, and then the green, blue, and orange is kind of what batteries do in today's market. So this was a trip that happened on the 22nd of February, and batteries kicked in and arrested the frequency move and brought that back to 50 hertz, which is very much what batteries are very good at. And I think some long duration storage techs can also do this as well. But that's really not what the future is. That's a part of how storage comes into a market, but it's not the future. This is a chart of revenues for the whole battery fleet going back until 2021. And effectively, that frequency response market only needs a gig or a gig and a half of batteries. And so here, that market was pretty much saturated by November the 22nd. And then on the right-hand side, you can kind of see where revenue levels ended up. Around about that 50K per megawatt per year level. And there are kind of reasons why that's a little bit low, but I won't go into them. The thing I really want to draw your attention to is the kind of colors of these bars. So this is the battery revenues across months. And so you've got things like the capacity market, frequency response, wholesale trading, and balancing mechanism. The main revenue in the past has been from frequency response. As I said, that's become saturated. And so the main revenue now going forward is from the wholesale market and from the balancing mechanism. And you can see those in kind of the medium purple and the lighter purple. And these are the critical markets for battery storage going forward. And so if you're thinking about doing a battery project, you should be thinking about, okay, well, what is the benefit I can be getting from the wholesale market? Because that's really going to drive a lot of what my revenue looks like. Then to talk about what's actually happening in power prices. So this is April of this year. I'm sure will recognize this. And on the left-hand side and the right-hand side of April, you've got some really conventional power price shapes. So this is typical demand being met by high efficiency gas in the kind of lows, and then low efficiency gas in the highs. And that is kind of what batteries are cycling around. So typically cycling twice per day and getting as much value out of that as possible. The really interesting things is that we're starting to see some of the sort of high wind weekends. So the 6th of April, the 12th of April, really strong wind generation, taking all of the gas off system and actually generating some periods of negative or near zero pricing. Super exciting, and actually really good news for things like long duration storage, because it starts to kind of highlight an intraday type cycling. They're a little bit few and far between at the moment. So if I just kind of highlight how much of this has happened so far in 2024, we've got around 70 hours-ish as of the early April, and then we had a bit more of it in early June. So our view is that we'll get to something like 200 or 300 hours of this by the time we get to the end of the year, but it'll be interesting to see how much of that comes through. I wanted to bring this up though, because it is highlighting that for long duration storage, this is kind of the market. This is the market that you're going to be playing in, and we are starting to now see that finally starting to come through with more wind, more solar. And so I wanted to make sure it's kind of hitting that point about there being real positives in the market for people who are looking at longer duration storage, so 8 hours plus. And just to wrap up, so LDES, like Oloda, is going to have to compete with short duration storage, and the kind of the number that we see in the market, I think that should be a pound number, is 100k per megawatt hour in terms of adding on extra capacity to storage sites that we're seeing. And so that is a number that we see in the market, and it kind of needs to be thought about. So one thing to be aware of: frequency response. If you're building a long duration storage project to deal with a frequency response issue for like an overall grid, I really don't think that should be where you should be focusing. You should be looking for those wholesale trading opportunities, e.g. the negative pricing piece that I just looked at. And then the last thing is to say that sort of the demand that we see and the solar shape that we see does create the kind of opportunity to trade a couple of times during the course of the day. And maybe that's 4, 6, 8 hours. But if you go longer than that, you have to go outside of a kind of within day balancing. You can still do the within day balancing, but to get the extra part of your storage to be used, you need to be looking into day, into week. And that means that you have fewer cycling opportunities, and you need to see a really big spread to make that happen. It's a huge commercial challenge. I don't think that huge commercial challenge is obviously hard for long duration storage. I don't think it's necessarily that means we shouldn't have long duration storage. It just means that how long duration storage comes through might be through another format. So LDES cap and floor is one example that the UK has looked at. I'm sure other markets will look at reserve type products as well. And that's it from me.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Ed, for your presentation. Moving on, last but certainly not least, we have Michael Geyer. He is the Senior Technical Advisor on pumped heat electricity storage at Malta. Good morning, Michael. I think, Ed, are you still sharing, or are you sharing already, Michael? I'm not sure who's...
No, just
okay.
a second. I am just looking compartir pantalla. Here we go.
No worries.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. We see
See
your
it full
presentation.
screen?
No, now we see it in full screen.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to speak at this webinar. I think the previous speakers, starting with Alex, have already, let's say, explained very well the need for long duration energy storage. I would like to complement here from a view, because I'm located in Spain, where we are developing LDES problems here at the Iberia, and I just wanted to complement here here from a European perspective the needs of long duration energy storage. I think, let's say, basically at Iberia and rest of Europe, what we are starting seeing is the need to replace gas-fired combined cycles. That is REPower EU, and that is where from Malta we are developing a like-to-like long-duration energy storage system for replacing fossil plants like coal and combined cycles. Our standard system is 100 megawatt discharge, but can be scaled up to 500 megawatts, like combined cycle. It can have 10 plus hours. And since we are using molten salts that have been matured in 30 gigawatt hours concentrating solar power plants over the world with no degradation, 35-year lifetime, and you can charge them 100% and discharge them. And let's say most important contribution is that, as I said, we provide same flexibility as gas power plants, synchronous inertia, short circuit current, reactive power. And so we can create additional connection capacity for non-synchronous generators. Now, short word about Malta. We are also a proud founding member of the Long Duration Energy Storage Council. Our shareholders are financial investors and like Google, Breakthrough Energy Ventures, Chevron, Piva, and our technology partners is Alfa Laval, Siemens Energy. Just to, let's say, I think Alex showed the left curve that here, the higher the renewable share, the longer the storage you need. And here in Iberia, we are at getting over 60% renewable annual share of power generation. And this increase, and so we have had the last 3 months, let's say over 10 hours per day at price zero due to the economic curtailment of renewables. But I think also a point that needs to be considered, and that is the need of storage to keep the lights on, and that is here the need for not only the frequency control, but also to have the rotating inertia, and that here on the right is a map of ENTSO-E, which shows additional storage capacities, additional to lithium-ion batteries in the various European countries, depending on their interconnection. And you see there, the Iberian Peninsula is electrically an island, and it's practically more an island than the UK or Ireland, because it only has currently 2.7 gigawatts of interconnection to France, and by 2030 it will have like 5 gigawatt, which is much less than the 15% interconnectivity here demanded by the European Commission. So the challenge, what we need for Repower EU is to replace gas turbine flexibility. And until 2030, there's data provided, developed by EASE, the European Association of Storage of Energy. We will need some 55 gigawatts of power to replace the gas turbines, and by 2050, some 200 gigawatts. Now here you see a recent example, a cry, let's say emergency cry of the Spanish Ministry for Energy, who are calling for 1,259 megawatt of synchronous generators and storage. And here, non-synchronous storage like lithium ion with synchronous condensers are not eligible, because here the Spanish grid operator does not feel that they would give the required grid stability. And so here is a first example in a country that I think is advanced in its accelerated, its renewable generation, the cry for synchronous generators and storage that have synchronous inertia and a short circuit current to have the grid stable. So just a short explanation on how here the Malta system is working. We are using the molten salt storage systems, nitrates, potassium, and sodium to store between 275-65 degrees centigrade. We have a cold storage, and in between we have a heat pump where you would need, based on turbo machinery, a charging. So we have turbo machinery for the charging as a consumer, and then we have turbo machinery for discharging as a generator. And here we can deliver some with a 55 to 60% round trip efficiency for electricity to electricity, plus process heat for district heating, some 70 megawatts. Here, the important thing, again, what I said is we teamed up here with Siemens Energy to have for charging here these charging turbo machinery set to pump the heat from the cold level to the hot level. And here we have the for the discharge, the turbo generator that will reconvert the heat to the power. And so we can contribute synchronous inertia, reactive power, and short circuit current. Now, this molten salt technology is mature, bankable. Just as the COP28 in Dubai was inaugurated, a complex of 4 concentrating solar power plants totaling 700 megawatts with 12 to 15 hours of molten salt storage, and with a power purchase agreement of 35 years, fully commercially financed, some $4.3 billion. And so this is where we just want to replace, let's say, the mirrors to heat the molten salt by electricity with increased efficiency by a heat pump, but placing like for like fossil power plants like coal plants and integrated combined cycle. So we are working currently in northern Spain to decarbonize a coal plant by replacing the coal boiler with a thermal storage that generates steam and runs the existing steam turbine and conserves also for fair transition the job. So reutilizing existing coal plant facility for here now renewable dispatchable power generation. And the same thing is we are studying this with combined cycle, where you would have here in future hydrogen-ready gas turbines, and then you would oversize the steam turbine. Here we have an example: 600 megawatt gas turbine, 300 megawatt steam turbine. You oversize this by initially some 50, 60 megawatts, and then you add a thermal storage that can here provide the steam and here increase the CO2 footprint of such combined cycles. And this we are working together with the Energy Resilience Leadership Group that had been founded by the at the Munich Security Conference last year, and where here our storage system has been selected as the innovative technology to accelerate here the decarbonization of fossil plants and reducing the need of import of fossil fuels, especially gas. You find my contact, and I thank you very much for the attention, and I hope I have kept the given time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, for your presentation. Congratulations on the selection by Energy Resilience Leadership Group. And yes, all of you, I have to say congratulations, because you've all been very mindful of the timing. So we do have a couple of minutes for questions, which I think that Stephen has answered a couple, as well as Ed. So we're going to have enough time to respond all the questions. I would like to start, because I usually always start with this question with the LDS community, is about the duration of long duration energy storage technologies. Alex did talk that they do think that 8 hours is kind of the established duration. Then there was a project that Ed showed that was 6 hours. Is there a minimum of hours that we consider long duration energy storage, or do you think there will be a consensus anytime, anywhere globally? How do you see that that definition going by? I don't. This one goes for all the speakers, and Alex is going to start. So yeah, please.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's not a physical, you know, it's not the laws of science aren't defining these things. It's clearly a, you know, a term we need to just coalesce around. So we define it as 8 hours plus. US Department of Energy says 10 hours plus. The UK's recent consultation on long duration electricity storage, not energy storage, electricity storage, had 6 hours plus. I think, you know, we're talking in that ballpark. I think that makes sense to us. Clearly, you know, there are different types of use cases beyond that, though. You know, there can be the need for seasonal storage for those real long tail events. Those can be multi-day storage that's needed as well. So try not to get too hung up on definitions, and of course recognize that, you know, different organizations will have their own particular definitions.
Makes sense. Thank you, Alex. Stephen, you would like to add something?
Yeah, I actually, or we think it's more useful to think about use cases rather than a specific number. And we think that there's the use cases are for shorter duration, which are often about grid stability and things like that. Then there's the medium duration bit where we sit, and as Ed was talking about, batteries are coming into that part of the market. And then there's the really interseasonal type thing, which is a sort of capacity security type solution, and also the duration for different markets. When you're talking about long duration and a short duration and interseasonal duration, if you have a market completely dominated by solar, the use case for interseasonal and long duration is entirely different for one dominated by wind, and therefore it's actually not particularly helpful to try and have a number, but more to describe use cases in our opinion of short, medium, and interseasonal is our view.
Thanks. And
yes, please.
Yeah. Can I just add? Thanks. I think I was coming from kind of the other end of the spectrum a bit with CASE, compressed air energy storage, of looking at days and weeks, rather than hours in that sense. So I think, as Steve just said, they all have applications and they're all required. But with CASE, it has the potential to kind of take out the need for another either gas-fired power station or the like in the whole energy system. So I think that's where that can fit. I think they all have a place, but it depends on the application and the use. But for energy security, something like CASE certainly has a place to play. But if we are going to do it, we have to think about it quite quickly, because these things can take 6, 8, 10 years to build. So it's not something that happens overnight.
Yeah.
Okay.
But just maybe add one thing to that. So agree with Stephen. I think there is real value in terms of what long duration storage can bring to a grid. Perhaps I disagree a little bit with Philip. I don't think that everything has a place. Unfortunately, at some point, all of these projects will meet some commercial reality. They will go into someone's Excel book. It's always Excel, and someone will make a decision on whether it's investable or not. And for the longer duration piece, maybe there'll be a reserve type product, or there'll be a cap and floor that will enable it to be investable. But essentially, all of this stuff, someone has to cough up the money at some point. And sadly, that means that not all of these long duration storage techs will come through and be part of the system. That won't happen. We will see the best ones take on key roles in the system. Really excited about that. But I don't think there's going to be a kind of blanket approach to everything's going to be a winner. And where it's going to really, the rubber's going to hit the road, so to speak, will come in those commercial models and the ones that are most viable.
Yeah, but building on what Ed was just saying, and completely agree with what he was saying, is that when you're looking at the market mechanisms, the shorter duration, the more you cycle it, and therefore the easier it is to earn your value stack from the trading of your asset. The longer the duration, the more that you need to find some sort of structural payment for that capacity. And therefore, the short duration needs to trade to earn their money. Long duration assets need to have some sort of insurance support mechanism. And, the realization that is how the market has to evolve. And, for where we sit, we see lots of value in the 8, 10, 12-hour duration where you're trading that regularly. But we do anticipate that if we were going out to something like 20 hours of payment, for that additional 10 to 20, you start to need increased amounts of support from the grid operator or the government or whoever it is to pay for that as an insurance policy. And that's how we see it will evolve. And it will evolve differently in different markets, depending on the politics of those markets.
Ed agrees.
Yeah.
All right. Yes.
So just quickly, yeah, thanks, Ed. While I agree that the markets and the investment will ultimately dictate this, I think as we increase our offshore wind, for example, with intermittency and the demand challenges, that there is a need to do something with this, and this is where things like CASE can come in. There is a lot of investment and groups and companies looking at this at the moment. So I still think they all have a part to play, but Ed's right that it's what's going to be competitive, what's going to be invested in, and they aren't all going to happen in the same timeline. But in some ways, most of them probably do need to happen at some point.
Just, yes, to add here is, I think it's very correct to see there are markets who are dominated by wind, there are markets dominated by solar, and Ed said it must be bankable on the Excel. I just recall the 700 megawatt project in Dubai. That is a solar market that was bankable, and there, let's say, the long duration storage was between 12 and 15 hours between sunset and sunrise. And the power purchase agreement was on $79 a megawatt hour, while during the day it was 20. So they have an average cost, 20 plus 80 is some $50 megawatt hour. And that is a business model, was financed and had long duration storage, 700 megawatts, 10 to 12 hours. So I think it's a fully commercial example.
Okay, well, thank you all for your opinions. So to finish up really quick, I don't know if Ed can answer the question quickly, just a couple of more minutes. We have a question for you that is a tricky question, I would say. It says, if the majority of your future revenue relies on wholesale market, how do you convince investors to finance the project, as there is a considerable uncertainty on future electricity prices?
Yeah,
Talks a little bit about tech.
Yeah, this is a really good question. So, like, one of the big things that's going on within the storage market at the moment is investors are looking at kind of contracted versus merchant, and contracted projects or contracted revenues might go on for multiple years, and you might be able to bring debt into those projects, and so they're a little bit more secure and slightly easier to convince financiers to kind of spend money on. Financiers are now starting to get more comfortable with backing some of these merchant risks. And one example that we've seen today of a way of someone dealing with that merchant risk is the very recent toll agreement that was done between Gresham House and Octopus Energy. So what effectively happened there was Octopus Energy agreed to provide a very fixed revenue for 2 years to Gresham House. And so going forward, we might well see market traders providing a fixed offtake and essentially using their using the kind of credibility of the offtaker, like a BP or like an NG or an RWE, might provide their credibility to give that financier confidence in those revenue streams. So I'd be really surprised if we don't see a lot more of that in the future to allow financiers to deal with that merchant risk exposure.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ed. Does any of the other panelists would like to add anything? I think we're good. All right. Well, I agree with the participants. Thank you so much for these insightful presentations, this information given. It's been a delight to have you all today. Thank you as well to everyone who's been watching the webinar, and we hope to see everyone very, very soon. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.